okay once they're talking. If they weren't talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD
I
or
got
something
nothing.
like that.
No, calm down, calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good.
I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
the
an
Chinese critic.
erratic
Mikhail
detective,
Rodriguez.
Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, Gildarie, you deal with that. You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Gildarie, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. You're watching the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show based in time zones wherever you are. It's good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We come to you twice weekly. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 8:30 to 9:30. It's a live program. If you go onto your smart TV and go to YouTube or Guyanese Critic Facebook page, there you will see us live in the studio. Our guest this evening is how shall I put it? It's unusual in that for the year that we've been running, we never had such a guest discuss such a topic. So we're extremely grateful for his presence. This is the first time since this program started last year, June. We've had someone with the experience, the capacity, and the qualification to discuss journalism. Before I introduce him, let me show you him in action. Operator, can you show guest in action?
Good morning, my name is Neil Marks and this is the newsroom on E-Networks. We're live at the High Court where Justice Franklin Holder is expected to hear a case brought before him blocking the recount of votes cast on March 2nd. There are many applicants here this morning who have to ask the judge to throw out that injunction to discharge it, to allow the recount to go ahead so that the final results for these elections could be declared. But there is a problem here this morning as there's limited access into the High Court. We were told that only a certain amount of media persons are allowed into the courtroom, as well as a certain number of international observers.
That person you were looking at is Neil Marks, one of Guyana's longest serving journalists. I think he has chalked up more than 20 years as a practicing journalist, 20 consecutive years. And we are quite elated this evening to have such a person discuss a topic on the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show that has not been discussed before. Neil, I've known you when we were working at Kaicho News together. Thanks for being here, and it's really a pleasure. I don't think we're going to get in 1 hour because there's so much to discuss with journalism. Well, let me ask you this. That clip that we showed, that must always be in your memory, because even though you were known as a journalist and you worked at the Chronicle as deputy editor, you worked at Kaicho News, I think you were catapulted into fame for 5 months in March to July 2020. Do you subscribe to that? That thing was going on for 5 months, and every day there was your face.
Well, I don't think we thought about it, Freddie. It was just us. Thank you for having me, by the way. I think it was just us doing the job, oblivious to the effects that it was having. We certainly understood at that time the reach of the newsroom during those elections. I was mentioning to you earlier that Newsroom is now today the most widely broadcast news program in the country. I say that because during the elections time, if our news was 1 minute late, you'll get a call, somebody will message you from Paramakatoy or some riverine area. And we never understood at that time the impact that we were having. So in any mountain, in any river community in Guyana, you can access the newsroom because of the satellite TV service that was set up by E-Networks. So yeah, that was certainly an interesting 5 months.
Okay. I'm looking at the camera, and I will ask you if you could draw your seat closer to mine.
Sure.
And look straight to the camera there. So just now I see we need to see this famous, viewers need to see this famous journalist. Neil, 20 years of journalism. To ask you for your reflections would take more than an hour, but let's tell our viewers how you started, what brought you into journalism, and then we'll talk about what kept you for 21 years in journalism. And I want to go back to that 5 month period, because I think in that 5 month period, you, Neil Marks, defined journalism. Which part in the world a journalist and journalists are reporting on an election results that took 5 months. But let's start with your origin. Why not medicine? Why not law? Why journalism?
I would have probably killed somebody if it was medicine.
You would probably kill somebody if it's what?
If it was medicine. So I started in journalism really by fluke. Because when I came out of high school, I lived in Enmore on the East Coast, right next to the sugar estate. And I attended Golden Grove Secondary. That's Golden Grove, the village next door to Enmore. And so after secondary school, after CXC, I started doing accounts work with a construction company. And after the first project, I realized, I think I confirmed rather that I hated maths. I didn't like anything to do with figures. And so I started looking for something else after that project ended. And I looked for vacancies, and there was an advert in the newspaper for a carpet inventory clerk at Libron, Germany. You would remember that.
I know that right thing. Walking was
yeah. So I was
Dublin Street.
So I was heading to that job this Monday morning, and I remember I was in the speedboat bridging, who by that time had moved to Lagrange over the river. And I was in the speedboat heading to this job, and I opened a newspaper, and there was a vacancy for media trainees at MBC 42, the channel on Camp Street. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting. So I thought, let me find out what this is about. I had no idea what the word media meant. But I remember on the interview, the person asked me if I think I could ask questions and get people to respond. And I said, yes, that's something that I can do. And so they sent me out on the road to do one of those box mob, the man in the street. So I did that, and that's really how I started. At that time, it was late 1997, early 1998. At that time, Guyana was just, I guess, rebuilding democracy after 1992. So UNESCO and the IDB and the government of Guyana had this program. It was a 2-month training program to what they said was to rehabilitate the media in Guyana after that period. So I attended that 2-month program. They trained you in TV, newspaper, and radio journalism. So I sat in on that program for 2 months, and that's how I started. I went to MTV, which was quite popular at the time, and then I moved on to the Guyana Chronicle and explored other media houses as time went on.
Well, I know you certainly were the Kaicho News. Neil, it's been more than 20 years. What for you what sustained you in journalism? Listen, I think after medicine and teaching, it's perhaps the third most important profession in the world after medicine and teaching. Journalists bring to the world the things that people need to know. So my question is, as you went on, year 1, year 2, you got to like it?
Yeah, I got to love it. I don't think that I could do anything else than what I do. And I didn't stay, I have to tell you, Fred, because of the pay, because journalism doesn't pay. We're one of the lowest paid workers in the country, perhaps in the world. I know certainly in Guyana, we don't get any sort of money in journalism. So it wasn't the pay. I think as time went on, I grew to love it and realized that this is what I should be doing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And sometimes I look back at it, I can't understand how I came to love it that much. But I remember in the mid-90s when I was in secondary school, that time there were all sorts of crises in the world. I remember on Sundays, I would be very anxious to read the newspaper, and I loved reading international news. I think in the mid-90s, there was the Bosnian War. I remember the siege of Sarajevo, the genocide in Rwanda, and those things captivated me. I read them. I followed those things very closely. And so when sometimes in retrospect, I think it was that early reading of the news that got me to love it. And as time went by, I sought out whatever training opportunities and so on that I could do. And that's what sustained me, really loving it and wanting to do it.
So you think if you're given an offer to do PR job for a firm or to go into some other company where the pay is good, but it wouldn't involve journalism, would you take it?
No, I don't think I would. I mean, look, things are changing. I've been in this profession for a very long time. And if there's an opportunity for me to do other work, I will do it. But I can't see myself not practicing journalism.
Well, I guess you're stuck with it for a few decades to come because you just returned from the UK doing a master's in journalism.
Yes, like I said, over the years, I never went to the University of Guyana because there isn't a journalism program there. There is a communications program, which doesn't really cater for the work that journalists do. Over years in the media houses that I worked for, we would bring in interns from time to time from the University of Guyana, from their communications program. And I realized that, these people aren't being trained for the job that we do. And so I never went to the university. And so it was many years after that election saga, I felt that I needed a break. I needed to leave Guyana a bit. And so I pursued educational opportunities. So I went to City University in London to do a master's in international journalism.
Well, when you saw you for 5 months, you certainly needed a break. It's every day the world, the region in Guyana was watching. And I think you defined yourself and you defined journalism in those 5 months. And I think that contribution of yours is going to last a long time when the name journalism comes up. But let me ask you something about those 5 months, because I want to talk about those 5 months. What is it like? Because I've been in journalism, but I haven't been doing what you were doing for that 5 months. You were there every day seeing an election unfold and people trying to tamper with an election results, not for 3 days, not for 30 days, but for 5 months. What was going through your mind as you get up in the morning and you have to go outside the court, you have to go at Ashman's? Was there any time you say, listen, what I've seen, I had enough?
Never. I think, while the situation was as horrible as it was, this is the job that journalists live their lives to do. I think during that time, it wasn't us getting up day by day thinking we have to go to work. We understood the importance of the moment, and we understood that this was our job. The work of journalists really is to hold truth to power and hold the authorities accountable, regardless of who they are. And so we didn't underestimate the position that we held to really ensure that democracy prevailed in Guyana. we aren't champions of democracy in that way and fighting for free and fair elections and all of that. But by necessity, our job gets us involved. And I think that as journalists, that is, the work that we have to do. We saw that there was a very naked attempt to rig the elections. That was very clear. And we knew that it was our privilege and our responsibility to ensure that the votes of people counted.
We're going to come back to the election results. We're going to go to that 5 months. My wife was just in charge. O'Neill on again. I can tell you, you certainly put journalism on the Guyanese map in those 5 months. I certainly looked at you every day. Was there any time in those 5 months you felt threatened? That was a terrible period.
There were many days when I was. Sometimes it would be from people on the road. Sometimes I remember when we were outside of the
Ashman?
Not Ashman's, the
Recount Center there?
Yes, the Arthur John Conference Center.
Yeah,
because we were broadcasting live from outside of the center. So cars were passing, people would cuss up and carry on. Some people, on the other hand, were very kind. There were days that people thought that they could bring something to help us in doing our job. There were people who sent messages through your Facebook page and other means to threaten you and tell you about all sorts of things. So yeah, there were those times that those things happened, but nothing, as serious enough to say, listen, I have to come off the air for today or whatever. Never, I don't think that I ever felt that way on any day.
There was any particular incident involving you alone in which people identify you and say, that's Neil Marks?
You mean in a threatening way?
During the 5 months, yeah.
Not that I can remember. One incident sticks out in my mind, but it was after the elections, after the president was sworn in. I was driving home, and there was this guy. It was bumper to bumper traffic. It's on the East Bank, and there was this guy in this car, and I drive with the windows down, and he saw me and he recognized me, and he said, he called out my name, and he started to curse me in the most nasty way, and I wasn't crossing the bridge. I was going way up on the East Bank, and he followed me all the way and kept doing that. And then I wanted to answer him, but then when I was about to shout something at him, I realized that the person next to him was recording me, and so I decided not to answer him and to wind up my window and put on my music, and I went home. I think that incident, really stood out in my mind, that people could go to that extent. So I suppose to intimidate you.
But at any point in time, do you think the occupants of that car intention was to hurt you?
No, I didn't feel that way. I think that it was
just being
being
mischievous
opportunistic and mischievous. Yeah, at that point in time.
We'll come back to the election period in your life as a journalist. So you've completed a master's in journalism, which will make you one of the few people, I think, in this country that has a master's, that have masters in journalism. Now, with that, I think you're more now attached to the profession. What I want to say is we've had people here who are extremely talented, extremely talented in the theater, in the arts and what have you, and they all came here and they complain about the salary. I hope someone like you, with 21 years in journalism, 21 consecutive years, and a master's, I hope the financial future looks secure.
I hope so too. I'm not badly paid at the moment, I must say.
Okay, now, you were in the news recently. You report the news, but you happen to be, you were reported on in the news. That was the Guyana Press Association elections. I thought, I I'm on the list of voters, but I didn't know where to check it. And I certainly would have voted for you. I think
You were on the list?
I think it's 3 years. You stay on the. Yes, I think I was on the list, but I didn't have access to that thing to check it. But I don't care what people say. I've never cared what people say since I was growing up in Waterville. I would have voted for you. I think you're one of the finest journalists this country has produced. I think you and Leonard Gildarie stand out as journalists who love the profession and will do things for it. And I think you and Gildarie have put journalism on the map. I can't think of anyone who is in journalism today that has chalked up 20 years and still around. I think there's the editor of the Starbuck News, but outside of him, it's certainly you. Now, I'm going to ask you a straightforward question without any nicety to it. Was that GPA election legitimate with all the legal things attached to it that made it a credible process?
I would say the process was legitimate. The actual everything else that was involved in it was not. So I would say that the process was legitimate, but it couldn't be counted as credible.
Is it true that there was a deliberate attempt not to allow the voters' list to be made public or people to have access to it days before the voting? Was that a decision? And if that was a decision, was it a legitimate decision by the bona fide executive?
Can I tell you how the process ran?
Yeah.
So, when I was a president of the GPA before, and when I ran for the presidency, there was no voters list. There was no voters list to present because there was no challenger. So there was no need for a vote at that time. So because there was no challenger, no one requested to see a voters list. That was the same case when Nazima first ran for president, Nazima Raghuber. I nominated her for the presidency and there was no challenger. So there was no need for anybody to ask for a voters list. This time around, however, we knew that Nazima intended to run for the presidency, and I was seeking election at that time because I think it was time for me to have that position again in order to advance the cause of journalism in Guyana. So I requested a voters list because I thought that was in fairness, because you can't have an incumbent on an executive determining the electoral process and the other party doesn't have the benefit of knowing the ins and outs. So I requested a voters list and that was denied. It was denied on the basis that the convention was that a voters list is never presented to the public or to members beforehand. And I argued that other conventions were broken, so this one could be broken. The other convention that was broken was that in the year that I ran for the presidency and the year and the 2 years after that Nazima ran, we accepted application forms and we accepted payments from members on the very election day. So it was only on the election day that you could have possibly had a voters list, because people are now coming in, they're paying, they qualify for membership and they're allowed to vote. So the convention was broken because this executive decided, I think 2 weeks in advance, that membership dues would be cut off and that they would not be accepting new members to the GPA in order to vote for the elections. And I knew that was crap, for want of a better word, because I was aware that new members to the executive were being signed up while others were not. For example, we have a whole list of people at the newsroom who would not have qualified for membership to vote simply on the basis that the executive at the time said no new members were going to be admitted. So you can't vote. So what's the point in applying for membership at that time? There was no rush. So all of those people did not sign up and weren't eligible to vote. On the other hand, the executive claimed that they had an outreach where they went to various media houses to seek new members. And indeed, that's what they did. They did go to media houses, but those media houses were the thing that they could gain membership to vote for them on elections day. So on that basis, I say that the elections could not have been credible because members were solicited that would vote for the executive. All four remaining executives on the GPA under the last body, they all ran for office again.
Do you think, what's your attitude, what's your opinion to the future credibility of the Guyana Press Association? This thing was given wide press publicity. On this show, it was discussed twice. I think the Minister of Labour had objections to a lawyer who was supposed to be independent, he being the presiding officer, Bud Schmidt. That whole episode was so sordid that it has to dent the credibility of the GPA. And I wonder if powerful policymakers would want to reach out to the GPA after what happened there. Your take?
I do believe that. I don't believe that the current GPA executive has the credibility. I don't think that they can command any respect from anybody. I mean, reporters, journalists, members of the media, our job is to be the watchdog in society. We advocate for transparency, for accountability, and all that good stuff. And if we can practice it within our own membership body, then that is a massive problem. And so the executive that exists, which was voted in on the basis of what I would consider a less than transparent process, cannot now ask somebody a question on credibility and accountability. And I feel very strongly about that. And I think that was one of the worst results that we could have hoped for from those elections.
Neil, I want to show you something, and I want to ask you, as one of the longest serving, I think it has to be you and Anand Prasad. I've been in journalism a long time, and I don't know anyone working at any of the newspapers, state-owned or private, television station. I don't know anyone who have chalked up more than 20 consecutive years. I want to ask you your opinion of this as one of Guyana's longest serving journalists. Let me put this up to the screen there.
Yeah, well, let me see too. I don't know what you're showing me.
Is there a Lone Ranger at Starbuck News? Now, I got a complaint from Dr. Randolph Prasad, professor at American University, that is doing a stint with the Office of the President as an advisor. He's a high-level professor at American University, and I think he's here working with the government. He complained to me that, look, something is wrong here. For months, my letters are not being published. So I sought comments from the different people involved. I sought a comment from the president of the Guyana Press Association, and this is what she said to me, and I reported it in my column in the Chronicle. She said, I am not giving a comment because I am not the Guyana Press Association. You have to talk to the Guyana Press Association. Now, I reported that here. In all my 35 years in journalism, I know you can go to the head of any corporation, any organization, and they would give you a comment and they would say, that is my opinion. I don't speak for the executive, and it would have to be taken to the executive. But she told me, I cannot speak to you. I cannot offer a comment. I am not the GPA. You have to go through a 9-member committee of the GPA. I don't think that obtains anywhere in the world. Why can't I ask the head of Republic Bank, the head of Banks DIH, the head of Judiciary for a comment? Why do I have to write to the whole judiciary? Why do I have to write a letter to Banks DIH? That's crazy.
I think you've answered your question yourself.
But that's what she told me. But let's look at this thing about Dr. Prasad not getting his letters published for months now. Could that be right?
I would want to refrain from commenting on the I don't understand what the editorial policy of the Starbrook News is. I've never worked there, but certainly I can say that the Starbrook News has been very generous in publishing letters from members of the public. So if somebody's complaining, I would find that very strange.
Okay, thanks. Now, your experience in journalism, you worked for the Chronicle, you worked for Starbrook News.
I did not work for Starbrook News. I've never worked for the Starbrook News.
The Kaicho News.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the high points and the low points? We're going to come to the election because that has to feature a big part in if you're going to write a book or you're going to give an interview. And I am not going to let you get away when 9:30 reaches without going back to that election period, because as I said before, that period defined Neil Marks, and it was a defining moment in journalism. Leaving out the 5 months, which we will come back to, what was your experience like at MBC, Chronicle, Kaicho? I know you a long time, and I know you're not like me. You're very guarded, you're very cautious, and you're not going to want to say it without mincing your words. But what was your experience like?
I've had an extremely good run. That sounds like I'm whining, and I'm not. But I've had an extremely good run. I think it was the stories that helped to change people's lives that I would say were my high points. I'll give you one example. There was this time I went to this little village. Oh goodness, what's its name now? I think, is it Swan?
Swan is not in Essequibo?
No, it's on the highway. I don't remember.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely on the highway. I know Swan.
Right. Anyways,
there's a little creek there.
Yeah. But anyways, it was this little community in the back there, and the children had this, they had like a board basically to go down to their boats. Sometimes if the water is too high, it means they have trouble getting into their boats. And I remember just taking a picture and wondering, whether this will have any impact. And I was very happy later on to learn that those people, because of that picture that was published, they then had a proper war for the children to get into their boats to go home after school and to get to school. So I think it's little things that have had great meaning for me in the work that I do. Certainly there were many interesting experiences throughout the years. I started
tell us some. We got time.
Yeah. I started my career when there was the challenge to the presidency of Janet Jagan. So I was this little stupid reporter on the street with a camera and not understanding all the implications of what was happening. I remember I was on that corner, Camp and Middle Street, and there was this massive protest coming down the road. And I remember one person shouting to me and saying, I won't use the expletive, but to say that, Kuliba, you're brave to be on the road. Because like I said,
it was equivalent to that.
Yeah, because I wasn't... I guess I didn't understand racial politics so deeply in Guyana. And so to that person, me, an Indian, should not have been on the road with all of these protesters coming down the road and so on. But I continued to do that. And throughout my career, I've had to deal with those experiences. So it was, so that was early 1998, and then we had elections in 2001, 2006. I would say the one in 2001, 2006 There was all sorts of trouble that we got into as journalists. I worked at MTV at that time, and we had a little grey bus that took us everywhere, so everybody knew that bus. So whenever we were coming up on the road, people knew it was MTV coming up. And I mean, the very nature of politics and the very nature of the media in Guyana has elements of polarization. So while the Indian population loved us at MTV, the other half did not like us. And so, we couldn't go to Buxton to cover anything. They see that little bus coming up the road, and we'd have to turn around. I remember one election night when the elections officials were being held up in the school in Sophia. When we went in there, they tried to run our bus off the road. Many times, I'll tell you two experiences that were very interesting. During the court cases at the High Court, when when the judge had thrown out the case against Jana Jagan at the time, we called the bus for pickup. And obviously, the driver's nervous and all of that. And I told him where to pick me up. When I got out of the court, you had that whole Avenue Republic full of protesters and whatnot, and there were the barricades there. And so I told him where to pick me up, and he never showed up at that spot. And so I came out of the gate, and there was this group of protesters running towards me. And a woman I'll never forget, Andrea Roller, she was the PRO of the People's National Congress at the time. She literally held on to me and grabbed me and pulled me in their bus and drove off so that I could be saved. And another time, it was the first time Robert Corbyn ran for the presidency and lost the elections. That was 2006. You may remember that better than me, Freddie. But we were at Congress Place. And what usually happens during elections time or big events, international journalists would come into the country and they would embed themselves with local media houses. So we had this guy from an agency in New York come and be with us at MTV. And we went into Congress Place together. And again, we were not very liked at Congress Place at the time. And he asked some sort of question that a whole room full of people did not like. They weren't the politicians, these were the activists and supporters. And it was literally hell for us to get out of Congress Place that day. And again, Andrea came and she said, "I'm going to take you out." And she held on to my hand and she walked me out of Congress Place all the way to the gate so that we could get into our transportation and leave safely. During the crime wave, our office was located on Regent Street, and one day bullets just fled. They riddled our building with bullets, and we were all on the floor of our news agency at that time. So those experiences I remember very vividly because they were frightening moments, but we were journalists, and like I said, like sometimes you get an adrenaline when these things happen because this is your profession, this is what you live for. You want to cover those events, and sometimes, harm could come your way.
Yeah, I know. I remember the 1992 election. The GCOM was in Cole Street, and I was with Father Morrison and the deputy editor of the Catholic Standard, Colin Smith. And people were literally pelting huge bricks at us. And it just makes you feel that you want to do it. You want to do it because
first set of people we are.
But I'm speaking to a person who have covered some eventful directions and misdirections in Guyanese sociology, in Guyanese social life. You just talk about the crime wave, you talk about the period with Mrs. Jagan. That was a period of slow fire, more fire.
Indeed.
The night on the street, particularly in Regent Street, they were cutting the fire engine hoses because they had lit Gimpex, which is a building owned by the PPP. Were you around?
Right, our office was right next door to Gimpex, yeah.
And you saw?
So we saw everything on Regent Street. Everything was happening on Regent Street at that time, and we had our own little crevices that we used to look through. So we saw everything that happened. We saw when people bought gas from the gas station and came out to the road and spill it and light fires. We saw everything. And you're talking about bricks. One of our cameramen.
Have you got those things on film?
I hope MTV still has them, but yeah, we did film all of it. Yeah.
Well, I know they have Ronald Waddell going to the gas station to fill up gas to burn the city. I know MTV still has that footage, but
I don't remember Mr. Waddell, but I do remember an individual.
I know Mr. Waddell. It was shown. MTV showed it.
Okay.
And then the police went after him, and he ran away and what have you. But let's come back to the defining moment of Neil Marks. March to July 2020. What did you capture the mood of three sides? The opposition, PPP, and the 9 parties, the incumbent, and the observer. Were you able to discern how they were thinking and where this thing would eventually lead to? Because the Trinidadian Prime Minister came and he said it's not going to end well. You felt like that?
I think at that time everybody were in sort of shock and awe that I think before the elections, when I was talking to people, you're talking to diplomats, you're talking to other people, and people are saying, it's basically saying it's impossible for you to want to rig an elections in this day and age. And I don't think anybody believed it. And then when it started to unravel, you're like, is this really happening? And I think that was the mood of everyone at that time. And day by day, the moments became more anxious. It's like, how far is this going to go? And is it going to continue? How will it stop? I don't think anybody had an answer in those 5 months until that fateful Sunday morning when we learned that the declaration was going to be made and the president was going to be sworn in on August 2nd. The moments just roll by. Like you get up one day, you go to work, you're wondering what is going to happen today. And is it going to be a hard day? Is it going to be a tough day? Is this going to be the day when it's going to happen? I think many days we prepared for a swearing in and a swearing in never happened. Because as it happened, you're like, okay, it has to stop here. It has to stop here. It can't go anymore. And it just kept going and going and going.
Where were you? Describe some of the times where you were. I could enumerate some. Were you there when Mingo went on the balcony to make the declaration?
No, I wasn't there that day. This all started, I believe, so Monday we had the elections. Tuesday night, all the drama started to play out when we realized that, the count for region, the tabulation for Region 4 was in trouble, and none of it made sense what was happening. The excuses for not counting, continuing the count and not having returning officers and all of that. It all started to happen there. So I worked that entire night, that Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. We were going live all the time. And so the Wednesday and the Thursday during the day, our other reporters were there in the building. Mind you, it was the strangest elections that I've ever covered. I mean, that may be an understatement, but in terms of access, the media always had access to a media center at an elections commission during elections time. You have a room set up, you have computers, you can stay there and work. At times they were very generous to provide us with meals. So the media is always very well taken care of, given our role in telling the world about the transparency of this process. And so this was the only time we did not have access to the media center. The media center was in that Ashman's building. There are many times when I tried to bluff my way past security to get into that building and they would not allow you. And so we had no space to work in the Ashman's building. So our access, media was not allowed in that. If you got into Ashman's building, you had to sneak your way in. And so a lot of the times we depended on people who were in the building to feed us information outside. That was the kind of restricted environment that we worked in during that time. Certainly during those days. So for the day when Mingo made his declaration, I think it was March 6th, We weren't actually in that building because we could not get in. So we relied on everything that was coming out at that time from other people.
But it had to be, you don't say it. Let me say it, because I know your temperament. Your temperament is not to go for the jugular. It would have been people like Roxanne Myers and other GCOM officials that would have given the order. It would have been, the police could not have dictated to the media that you can't go in there. It had to be GCOM people.
Yeah, it had to be officials in the GCOM secretariat. So it had to be either the CEO or the DCO. I don't know who was responsible entirely for that area, but it would have had to be in them. Yeah, somebody. Either Mr. Lowenfield or Miss Myers. I'm not sure who it was. But we certainly did not have access to that media center after there was one press conference, I believe, that was held after the elections, and after that room was closed to us. And actually, I think that it was the same room or the adjacent room that was used when remember the foreign minister speaking with observers, and that whole fiasco took place. I don't know if you remember when Owen Hart at the time basically abused out the foreign minister to say you can't come in here and tell us stuff.
Come. Now,
yeah.
I'm coming to that. So that's one, Mingo on the balcony. Two, the confusion that the world saw, the GCOM chairman in a room and people think she is dead.
I was live on air at that time when that was happening, and one of our reporters was on the ground. I don't remember if it was Kurt or Bibi. But they were on the ground covering that madness. That was certainly a day. And like I said, because of the restricted access, we had a hard time figuring out what was happening actually in the building, and we had to be fed information, but we were certainly outside of that building and getting as much information as we could from people who went in and out of it. We weren't allowed in.
At that time in the building with the confusion, did anyone in the media, including yourself, felt that there was danger, something was happening to the GCOM chairman?
Yes, we did get the sense that something was amiss, like I said, but we weren't eyewitnesses to it, so we couldn't, determine for ourselves. We just had to, and there were some crazy moments, because I remember.
Tell us about those crazy moments. You were right there.
Yeah, so I remember that I was live on air, and we switched right away. And as soon as the camera switched to Ashman's building, there was a security guard yelling, "Oh God, they killed Shisha dead," that kind of. So things were happening so fast. It was, in a live situation, it's really hard to control what comes out of it. Certainly, we would not have wanted that woman to come on saying that, because we couldn't establish that right away. But yeah, there were. Yeah, there were rough times when we were here. One of the most interesting moments for me, though, during that entire period, I'll tell you. So when the decision was made to do the recount, because Newsroom was live, and I think that people looked to us as the authority in covering the elections at the time, we thought that we should cover the recount live. And we went about securing equipment and so on that we thought that would achieve that objective, because at that time they had already determined that they will have 10 counting stations. So we determined, okay, we need 10 cameras. How are we going to get it out to people? Blah, blah, blah. I was in constant communication with the chair of the Elections Commission at the time. Certainly Mr. Lowenfield wasn't taking my calls at that time.
He knew your number, so he wasn't.
I don't know, whatever reason, whether he was busy or he changed his phone, I'm not sure. But I could not get on to him. So I was communicating with the chairman of the Elections Commission, and I was emphasizing to her the need for this process to be covered live. To her credit, I can say that she did try. But in the end, the decision was made that we would not have access to cover the recount live, and that they would give us a feed and we would carry that. So we said, fine. The morning when the actual count started, I tried again, and she said that she would allow me in to see the opening of the first set of ballot boxes for the recount. So we went into the Artichon Conference Center. That was a whole hassle to get in there because media ain't getting in there. So after we established that we were invited,
there were comical parts of that election.
when we established that we were invited by the chair of the Elections Commission to enter the conference center, we got in. First, we tried to go around to see where the ballot boxes were in the containers, but then security quickly ushered us back in, and we went through the front door. From the moment we cleared the security, this to me was the most startling moment for me when I thought that the chair of the Elections Commission was no longer in control of this process, because she invited me in, and I have all of this on video, so anyone can verify it. Once we cleared the security at the conference center, Maxine Graham, who was, I believe, assistant commissioner, I think she's now retired.
Yes.
She came in front of the chair of the Elections Commission and said that we cannot be in here. So she overruled the decision of the chairman that we could not be in there.
I'm going to look in the camera. This is such an important interview. This is such an important. This is our first time in this program that we're having a journalist, and I'm telling you, Neil, this is so absorbing. Go on.
Yeah. So she came up to the chairman and told her that we could not be there.
A police officer?
Yes, and we had to leave that building. I told my cameraman...
the chairman was right there?
You could hear it on the live too. I was telling my cameraman, because we were trying to capture this moment and they were telling us we can't record, but I was telling him, record, and all of that came over live, but don't let them see you recording. All of that came over because we understood the importance of that moment. So if we could capture it, regardless of how, we could capture it, we decided to do that. And then after that, she said, we had to leave the building. But then they said, okay, they're going to let us film one of the thing, and then we had to leave. So we filmed the thing. I think I was allowed to film it with my my phone. So I did that because the cameraman had to leave the building. And after we left and we went back, it became even more crazy and outrageous because my phone rang down after I left that conference center because the chairman said that, anyways, the chairman said at that time, when she eventually got on to me, that the people, the elections officials, I don't know who they were, who told her that we had planted a device at the conference center and we had left devices in there, even though we had left.
And that was an accusation against people?
Yeah, that's what the chairman...
That included you?
Yeah, that's what the chairman said. She said that even though we had left, the people were saying that we left devices there so we could record what was going on. I know we got all of them powers, but that's what they said. And so I had to assure her, no, we did not. We left the conference center as we were instructed to do after I was allowed to take my phone, I believe it was, and take out the opening of the remaining ballots. So when I don't know if my phone was on silent or something, but when I saw all these missed calls from the chairman, like, what happened? And then when we spoke, that's what she said. I was being accused of leaving devices in the conference center. So there were so many bizarre things with that entire process. It's really hard to comprehend when you do look back at it.
You as you get older, you plan to write a book, and that would you have that. Because most journalists write books.
Yeah.
Except me. Yeah.
But writing calls for a lot of time and a lot of dedication, which I haven't been able to do. Honestly. But it certainly would be interesting to do something like that. I did try, but when you get absorbed in work, it's difficult to focus on just this one thing. So I haven't been able to focus on that one thing.
They have a program in the United States. I don't know if they have it anywhere else in the world. Remember, we're close to the US, so we look at US programs all the time. Meet the Press, in which the press meet and the journalists discuss things. If I should say to you now, meet the press, I am the interviewer and I'm interviewing a set of journalists about the topics. What topics would you like to discuss with me? You
mean you, Freddie Kissoon?
The interviewer, no.
I don't know because I like to interview a range of people on a range of subjects.
Well, I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah.
What topics would you like to talk?
Anything really.